Bumblebees, it's Teddy BB Bear here, back with another episode of Shadows, the horror movie Heroes by Clouds. My Head in the Clouds, Not Coming Down, on AO3. If you guys could go to the link in the description and head over on to AO3 and give Cloud some love on her original fic, that would be great. And now on to the story. Chapter 14, Hot Potato. Denki's eyes widened as a hero came barreling into the bank and grabbed both of them with tentacles that were growing like hair out of his head. He immediately started struggling against the hold, which made the hero smile. "Hey man, that's not gonna work. I'm Ogawa. Oh, sorry. I don't really have an official hero name yet, but anyway, I'm here to stop you." "Just follow my lead, Sparky." Even though she was as trapped as he was, Mom grinned. "Eat our sparks." She electrified herself, and Denki only hesitated a moment before doing the same. The hero seized and stumbled back, loosening his tentacles just enough that Denki could wriggle his way free. Mom bolted out the door, and Denki shoved the objective under his arm as he scrambled after her. It didn't take long for the hero to recover from their joint attack, not nearly as long as Denki had expected, and they only had a few seconds head start down the street before he was crashing after them. Denki could see the other villains from earlier, watching them from the surrounding rooftops, and gulped as he gripped the objective a little tighter against his body. If this was what being a villain was like, why would anyone choose that? They were surrounded by enemies on every side. Who wanted to live like that? One of the villains was absolutely huge, and Denki caught a glimpse of him throwing himself off the roof and onto the hero. Denki didn't look back to make sure the hero was alright, though, because he was too busy worrying about the other two villains, a man and a woman, who had just dropped down to block their path. He skidded to a stop beside Mom, who was already in a fighting stance, staring down their new opponents. "I'd give up now if I were you, fellas," Mom smiled. "You couldn't beat me earlier, you can't beat me now." "We weren't trying our best earlier," the woman smirked and pulled out a dull knife coated in red paint. "But now that your boy there did the work of getting the objective, it's a different story." "Toss me the bag," Mom said without looking at him. "We'll split up and meet at the rendezvous point. Got it?" Denki nodded quickly. "Okay. Go!" He tossed her the bag, but before she could catch it, a gust of wind picked it up and carried it toward the male villain. "Got ya!" "Oh," Denki said quietly. "Well, that's not good." "Electricity quirks, most likely related, and the ages point to a mother-son duo," Izuku muttered under his breath. "Fairly standard strength enhancement. I wonder if it's like fat gums and has to do with body weight? Something to do with knives and an obvious wind manipulation. I wonder how far that goes." Hitoshi shook his head as Izuku muttered to himself. They had managed to find a nice apartment for themselves, without too many neighbors, and so far no one had noticed that they weren't supposed to be there, which was good. The other villains were running around, completely unaware that Izuku was tearing apart their quirks through the cameras, and Hitoshi was doing his best to do the same with their personalities. The electricity quirk users would be hard to turn against each other, but he might be able to do it if he took control of one and gave just the right orders. Making them fight each other in general would also be effective emotional manipulation. So there were plenty of things he could do. The heroes had managed to arrest a couple of the minor villains right off the bat. The ones with the grasshopper quirks had gotten away, and it still remained to be seen who would end up with the bank objective, and if any of those villains would actually get away. If anyone did, Hitoshi was betting on the older two of the electricity users. She seemed to have the most fighting experience out of everyone there. Hitoshi had doubted that the heroes would actually take the objectives to the agency, but the trio who had protected the vase had immediately decided to do just that, which meant that their plan was on track. Hitoshi glanced over to Izuku and sighed. Nobody but Izuku was crazy enough to come up with that plan. Jiro hadn't taken part in the initial rush either, but that didn't mean she'd just been sitting around. She'd been looking for something, as far as Hitoshi could tell, and she'd been camped outside a tech store for a few minutes now looking for a mark. At least, that's what Hitoshi assumed she was doing. She kept looking at the people passing by, and almost approaching them before chickening out. She somehow still managed to keep mostly out of sight, which meant that no one had noticed her suspicious behavior. But she needed to act quickly and do whatever she was planning soon, or else she was going to get caught. A young man, a few years older than them, walked by her hiding spot, and Jiro took a deep breath before strolling out of her hiding spot, carefully looking as normal as possible as she trailed after the guy. When he was almost at the store, he suddenly went rigid before relaxing, and Hitoshi leaned forward to get a closer look at the screen. It was hard to see, but it almost looked like Jiro had stabbed one of her It was hard to see, but it almost looked like Jiro had stabbed one of her earphone jacks into his hand. But he couldn't be sure, because it wasn't a second later that they started moving, him walking right beside her the whole way. Hey, Izuku, can you get me visuals inside the Hey, Izuku, can you get me any visuals inside the electronics store? Hitoshi asked. I think Jiro's making a move. Sure. Izuku absently pulled up the cameras and went back to watching the other villain fights. Tell me if she does anything interesting. Hitoshi nodded and watched, as Jiro walked with her victim through the store, picking up some high-end speakers before whispering something to the guy and walking up to the counter. She didn't have to say another word. The guy flashed his token and paid for the speakers, and Hitoshi's jaw dropped as he realized that she was somehow controlling him through her earphone jacks. Hey, Izuku, I think you're going to want to see this. He pointed to Jiro, who was simply walking out of the store with her victim like nothing was out of the ordinary. I'm not the only brainwasher here. Really? Izuku watched for a moment and then started muttering again. This is perfect. If we can convince the police and heroes that she's committing her crimes, then we won't have to be as careful. Not that we weren't going to be careful in the first place, obviously, but it'll give us some leeway. He trailed off and started scribbling in his notebook. Hitoshi kept watching as Jiro got partially down the street and then yanked the speakers out of the guy's hand and started booking it as her victim screamed. He winced. By the way, Hitoshi grimaced, she might need a little bit more quirk training. The guy with the wind quirk smirked at them as he tossed the objective up and down. He was too far away for Dinky to hit with his electricity, but it looked like Mom had it covered. She ran forward, hands already sparking, until the women with the knives threw one at her face. She managed to dodge, barely, but had to turn to fight the woman instead of the stupid guy, who was now running away with the objective. Denki looked back toward the hero, who was still fighting the big guy, and swore. It looked like it was up to him. He bolted after the wind quirk user, who suddenly stopped when he ran into a crowd of people. Denki didn't have time to stop before barreling into him. It took him a split second to think to activate his quirk, which gave Wind Guy an opening to throw the bag over to Big Guy, who caught it. The hero, though, responded by wrapping him up in his tentacles, and he had to wriggle out of them to toss the objective again. Mom shoved Knife Lady to the ground and jumped to catch it, then threw it to Denki. Run, Sparky! Denki almost fumbled the bag, but managed to catch it just barely and ran as fast as he could. He skidded around the corner and grinned. He'd done it! He'd gotten away! There was a burning pain in his lungs, and Denki stumbled to a stop, unable to breathe. What was happening? Was he dying? Was this a medical emergency? Had he punctured a lung? He collapsed to the ground, dropping the objective as his fingers lost the strength to grip it. What was going on? That was a pretty good shock there, Sparky, a voice said, and Daiki tried gasping for air as Wind Guy knelt in front of him and grabbed the objective. Too bad my quirk is air control, huh? It works on the air in people's lungs, too. As I'm sure you've already figured out. I'll let you breathe in a minute, but, I'll be keeping this for safekeeping, okay? He winked and disappeared into the darkness at the end of the alley. Denki had no idea if the time after was actually a minute, but if it was, it felt like the longest minute of his life. His vision was starting to go dark before he felt air flooding back into his lungs again. He coughed and gulped, desperately trying to get enough oxygen. At some point, he felt a hand rubbing his back and his mom's voice trying to calm him down, but it was kind of hazy. After he finally managed to get his breathing under control again, he looked up to see Mom looking at him in concern. Are you okay, Sparky? I'll get back to you on that, Denki rasped. Wind Guy got away. Mom nodded. So did the lady with the knives. The big guy got caught by the hero, though. Let's hurry and get away while he's still busy with the arrest. Denki nodded and shakily got to his feet. Why would anyone want to be a villain? Hello, Bumblebees! It's Teddy BB Bear here, and that wraps up Chapter 14 of Shadows, the horror movie heroes. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you all enjoyed this wonderful story by Clouds. This podfic is brought to you as a Project Cyclone production. More info about other projects we worked on in the description, as well as links to our website and Instagram. If you want to support Project Cyclone and all our future productions, please consider joining our Patreon or sharing our content through word of mouth. We really appreciate your support. It makes it possible for me and my friends behind the scenes to keep making content for you guys. Also, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on whatever platform you may be listening to us. Sweet dreams and a restful hibernation to you all. Bye-bye.